Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you are here for this, our third in our series of coffee chats with our alumni engagement practice. I'm Dillon, your host, Executive Director of Relations at the University of California at Berkeley. Today, we're going to be talking about alumni relations without in-person graduation strategies for welcoming the class of 2020. We're have you here. I want to call attention to this screen with some information about how to enter questions into the Q&A below and in the chat. Let's reserve the chat for positive comments and support resources that we can share with one another. And both the Q&A and the chat will be saved and they're anonymous. So we will be sending it out after this session is live and with the recording so that it will help connect you with other attendees today. All right, so we'll leave this slide up for a few minutes as people start joining.
Your audience.
Okay, so we are very happy to have you with us here today to talk about all things engagement and the class of 2020 and beyond. Today is a panel of alumni relations pros with decades of experience at both public and private universities. Our hope is to make this conversation as informal and as in-depth as possible. We talk about the challenges that are facing advancement now and into the future. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions for this session. We had over 150 questions come in with registration, and we look forward to your live questions today as well. We've bucketed your questions into 3 different themes for today, and they're on your screen. First is immediate ideas for the class of 2020 and beyond, transitioning traditions and prioritizing effort, and then volunteers, chapters, membership, and more. Finally, we will get to your questions, as many of those as we can. And then at the end, we're going to invite back our panelists from our previous sessions to ask them, what have you learned in these past few weeks since we last saw you? So thank you, everybody. Apologize for the little hiccup here with the audio, but I hope you can hear us clearly now. So that means it's time to get ready to talk with our panelists. All right. For today, our goal is simple. We want you to learn a lot, have fun, and learn a lot. So let's begin. I'll let each of my colleagues introduce themselves in response to our first question. So here it is. In education, there is perhaps no more sacred or storied tradition than the in-person graduation. It's quite literally the moment where students transition into becoming a part of the alumni family. So our question is this: without in-person graduation this year, what are your top 2 immediate ideas about how to welcome the class of 2020 and beyond? Reflection on this question, I'll turn to my colleague, Jorge. Jorge, welcome.
I was going to say thank you so much, Jay, for involving all of us in this type of conversation and for launching this series. I really think it's terrific for us as we think about how we build our community in these times. So first and foremost, let me just begin by introducing myself. My name is Jorge Ancona. I serve as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Alumni Engagement and Executive Director at the University of California, Riverside. I've been in higher education now for 28 years, and 26 of those years have been in alumni relations. During my first 8 years in alumni relations, I was at UCLA, my alma mater, and there we would host an open house as an opportunity for us to come through the James West Alumni Center, pick up a gift from the Alumni Association, and also have a little bit of a reprieve from the June heat in Southern California in between ceremonies. When I made my transition to the University of California, Irvine, I found that the role that the Alumni Association played in commencement was a little bit more complicated, a little bit different. The Alumni Association was responsible for handling all regalia. So we were in charge of selling the regalia to all the graduating students. We were in charge of ordering regalia for all the faculty that were going to be participating in the ceremony. of the Mace, a wonderful university tradition. So in every ceremony, we played a role. When I made the transition 7 years ago to the University of California, Riverside, I quickly found out that the role that we played was even more intense. We're responsible for organizing 8 out of the 9 ceremonies for our campus, which means that not only are we managing all the regalia for the faculty, but we're also handling the coordination and production of 8 of those ceremonies. And so for us, we've always played a significant role in helping our students make that transition from students to alumni. And in addition to that, we were also responsible for putting together the grad fair, something that this year we had to pivot rather quickly and go from an in-person grad fair to something that we're now doing remotely. And so for us, one of the big things that we did was figuring out how we could leverage the alumni network so that we know that alumni want to help. And so even without asking, both our board members and reached out to us saying, how can we be of assistance? Some of them wanted to help raise funds for our students. Others were wanting to participate and willing to participate in career fairs, not as potential employers, but as a way for them to be able to start, and having them expand their networks. Others wanted to serve as mentors and panelists. So that was one way we were able to immediately pivot, and we've already launched some of those programs. And then we have our Highlander Welcomes, which is a program that historically we do in the summer in person, but this time we're doing a little bit differently. It's going to be all done remotely. Each of our chapters and clubs is selecting one topic to cover. Sometimes one of it might be in terms of how do you do a job search in the middle of a recession. Some of our members have experience with that, those that graduated in 2008 and 2009. Then others are tips on doing virtual interviewing, right? So not only are you, how do you think about your attire, your lighting, but also what does your background look like? And so those are some of the immediate things that come to mind.
Thank you so much, Jorge. For those of you who don't know, I actually grew up in Riverside and have a great affinity for the work that Jorge is doing at UCR, and thank him so much for joining us today. So our next panelist, I'm happy to turn to Paul for his insights. What are your top 2 things we could be doing now for the class of 2020?
Jay, it's great to be with you all today here from Happy Valley, Pennsylvania. It's great to be on this panel at this special moment in the history of our institutions. My career has spanned now 6 institutions, from James Madison to the State University of New York at New Paltz, the University of Connecticut, East Carolina, the University of Oregon, and now back home in Pennsylvania at Penn State. And, in my 23-year career in higher education, there's never been a more important moment during our careers for alumni relations than right now. Development has slowed their solicitations. Athletics is on hiatus. Our students have moved to remote learning. And it's our time to shine at what we do best, and that's communicating and spreading the good news of our institutions. It's cultivating community, and it's mobilizing our network. Alumni associations that have had kind of strong commitments to student programs were able to act and activate quickly on what a class of 2020 engagement strategy might look like. At Penn State, because we've already had a strong engagement, a strong student engagement, our transition and our shift has included things like rebranding our senior year communications to the class of 2020, actually renaming it the class of 2020 newsletter, recognizing leaders within the community through a coffee hour that I host every Wednesday morning. Now 7 weeks, we'll be 8 weeks into it now, with 8 different student leaders, and allowing them to tell their story. We move forward with our senior week programs in a virtual format. And so we were able to, again, pick up and continue the tradition, albeit in a different manner. And we also recognize some traditions like the lap around campus that students take to get their pictures taken all over campus. If I were to throw out a couple quick ideas on how to recognize the class of 2020 moving forward, they would include, if you have a membership program and you don't offer that initial class a free membership, that this would be the right class to offer that to. We have a tradition of doing that already at Penn State, and so all new classes get their first year for free. If you don't have a membership program, send your magazine to that class, right? Include them in your first year of communications. And then try to find some high profile, maybe non-traditional way to recognize them, whether it's letting them form the tunnel that the football team runs through at the first game back in the stadium, or let them march in your homecoming parade, but a way where we can kind of hold up and applaud them for all they've been able to accomplish.
Thank you, Paul. That's very well said. And I'm sure many of us will join you on those Wednesday coffee chats as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful ideas about how to involve the students in, a parade or some other type of activity where they can be continued to be recognized beyond what would have been their in-person graduation date. Our third panelist with us today is Susan. And so Susan, what are your two top immediate things for the class of 2020?
So, first of all, I'm honored to be a part of such a wonderful panel, and it's great to see so many friends and see some familiar names, and even some of my alums are in the audience today. So shout out to the Hopkins alums joining us. I have been in development and alumni relations for almost 27, 28 years now. I have been a frontline fundraiser for Hopkins. All my careers at Hopkins. I've raised a $5 gift and been a part of some major multi-million-dollar strategies. So this is my world coming to alumni relations. I come with a different background. As I look at the class of 2020 and commencement and what can we do, I think really what we need, there are a couple things we need to remember. First of all, you cannot put virtual in front of it, whatever it is, and suddenly it's okay. And it's suddenly a part of the now, and it's important. I think more than anything, we have to understand that it's not a one size fits all. And coming from Hopkins, where we don't have a big football team, we have a great football team. They've been Centennial Conference champs, but we're not D1. We're only D1 in lacrosse. So we can build on some of those traditions, but that happens in the spring. We're in the fall when we're coming back, we hope. So what can we do? I've really challenged my team to reach out to the students and ask them. Ask our student ambassadors, get their perspective so that we're not just kind of shooting in the dark. And we want to make sure that we bring them into the ideas. As we create, for example, our networking platforms, it's not just saying now we're going to have a virtual networking platform. It has to be for that specific class, for those specific industries, for maybe the first gen or the underrepresented students. We really need to focus in a very kind of labor intensive way. We all know alumni relations is a very intensive, labor intensive field. Now more than anything, I think we need to focus in on those specific needs, and it's not just a one size fits all. So that's what we're doing as we're trying to build these programs. And we're also working and relying a lot on our student government and our student ambassadors, bringing them in and really, as I said earlier, asking their opinions as to what it is that they want and not just assume. And may I say, don't assume you have the right answer, because it's okay if you don't. Now is the time to get more intel and build on that information.
That's very well said, Susan. And it's certainly true that the more we can involve alumni in helping us understand what their needs are and might be, especially as students make that transition. And again, not to make those assumptions is critically important. I think the second point you made too is equally valuable, which is to not be afraid to try something right now. So thank you. And now going on to our second question. Again, this is pulled sort of as a theme from the questions that were submitted with your registration for the webinar. So graduation is certainly not the only tradition that will need reframing now and then into the fall and the spring. As we think of class of 2021, these things are certainly going to be on our mind once again. So other traditions like homecoming, reunions, young alumni activities, they are all a part of the alumni narrative. So the question here is, how could we plan and prioritize our efforts for the fluidity of the future? Because we know things are sort of going to be changing here for a while. And Susan, I'd like to kick this one back to you. How can we plan and prioritize?
So we, as I said, Hopkins doesn't have a whole lot of traditions such as tunnels at football games and the Nittany Lion where everybody goes and gets their picture taken, and the walls at UCLA and USC, et cetera, et cetera. What we did is we took a really solid look at our virtual reunion program. It's a 2.5-day program that was supposed to run 3 weeks ago. And as I said earlier, you just don't put the term virtual in it and throw up 132 events in 2.5 days and assume everybody's going to watch it. Our challenge was, what is it that's really emotional to the alum? What is it that really makes that Hopkins reunion program special? So we have two elements. We have our Hopkins talks from our department and our faculty. That works for us. We have a lot of student activities. We have invested and involved in a lot of our programs already and other schools on campus so that we're partnering with them. But more than anything, what is it that's emotional? And what we opted to choose were a lot of the programs that you would think we wouldn't, such as our crab cake luncheon, which is usually a luncheon for about 1,600 of our closest friends, that we then walk to our stadium and we see a lacrosse game. Clearly we can't do that, but we can, because it's important to our alums. So how are we going to do it? We actually, in our reunion registration, have the opportunity to watch a chef make Maryland crab cakes, real Maryland crab cakes, might I say. And if you want, you can, we're very focused on providing support to local Baltimore businesses. It's called Baltimore Local. And we have links to many of the businesses in town where you can either get the crab meat and have the recipe and make the crab cakes along with the chef, or you can go ahead and order crab cakes from one of the local restaurants and eat your crab cakes while the chef is doing that, making his crab cakes. And then we have a new lacrosse coach, and we're introducing the new lacrosse coach to our alums, and then showing, it just so happens, thankfully so, this is the 2005, this is the 15th anniversary of our 2005 Division I championship win for lacrosse. And so we are showing the lacrosse game and celebrating that, and hopefully have some of the players, some of the key players, who will then do answer questions during it. But that's touching on the emotional part so that we're not losing that piece that is a part of Hopkins. We also have a 5K run at the end of the reunion weekend. Norm, sometimes with the president, sometimes not. This time he's not able to join us. So we're all doing our own 5Ks with pictures afterwards, et cetera. Anyway, you get the idea. We're tying in what we can and building it together. So that's some of the things. Find that emotional thread and build on that. And that hopefully you bring them inside the Beltway and you build your program.
Very well said, Susan. Bringing that idea of an emotional thread, that's what ties us all together as alumni, in this uniquely American idea that where you went to college informs your identity for the rest of your life. Something I'm personally fascinated in. I also would love to participate in learning how to make a Maryland crab cake, because out here on the West Coast, I certainly know nothing about that. Okay, I'd like to turn to Jorge again in Riverside with maybe a perspective on this too. Homecoming, other traditions, how are you thinking about prioritizing these efforts?
So the first thing we did, Jay, was we looked at our fall schedule. Well, we actually looked at our spring schedule, summer schedule, and fall schedule. And we created a master list, not only for the alumni engagement program, but also for university advancement, anything that was external focused. And one of the things that we decided to do right off the bat was determine what could be postponed, what needed to be canceled, and what we could move online, right? So for the online programs, we knew it could not be, business as usual, meaning we can't bring a faculty member per se and have them speak for 50 minutes like they would a natural lecture or for a lecture at homecoming. So how do we make it more dynamic? How do we make it more engaging? And so that was part of the challenge and part of the task as well. The other thing too is, when we think about including some of our younger alumni in this, we know that probably when they're thinking about what can alma mater do for them, it's going to be, how can you help me with my job search? How can you help me, expand my network? So one of the things that we're looking at, we've always had a mentorship program. It's been handled more in-house. We're looking at platforms that might be able to expand that reach. One of the first groups that we're going out to as we launch a new program is going to be reaching out to our graduating seniors so that they feel like they're immediately part of a community. From there, we're going to then invite our alumni to help populate that platform over the course of the summer. And our idea is to then roll it out to the class of 2021 as we enter the fall, so that all three of them can then start connecting with one another, pass on those tidbits that they learn along the way. I think the thing that's most important, as Susan mentioned earlier, is to not make assumptions. So, something like homecoming, this is supposed to be a reunion for our pioneer class. Now, for those of you that may not know what our pioneer class are those individuals that were on campus when it first opened, and that was in the 50s for us. So these are individuals that are in their 80s. All along, we said, with the coronavirus, they're a group that would be, high risk. Is this something that you want to move forward with? And initially was, yes, let's plan and let's see what happens. Well, just recently we asked them, how would you feel about, would you feel comfortable with an in-person event? Or, if we were to put it online, would you participate? And surprisingly enough, they were very forthcoming. They said, Zoom is a lot of fun. If you're going to have something online, be sure you don't disable the chat feature. Otherwise, what's the point? We want to connect with one another, so don't mute us. And so here we're thinking, here are 80-somethings that might be technologically challenged, and they're saying, no, bring it on. This is something that we're looking forward to doing. And they're getting older, and they recognize that they have a few reunions left in them, and so for them, it's one of those things of this applies also to our young alumni. Don't assume you know what they want. Engage them in the conversation. Our students were very clear when they told us, we don't want an online commencement. We want an online celebration marking the occasion that we have graduated. And then when it's safe for us to come together, whether that's in 6 months, a year from now, we want a commencement that will take place on campus so that we can all gather, walk across that stage and have our moment. And so those are the things that we've been working on. And again, it's talking, if you can, talk to the constituents that are being impacted and find out from them, what is it that they need? What would they like to see?
Thank you, Jorge. I would love to be in that chat with the 80-something pioneer class at UC Riverside. That sounds like so much fun. And again, I think technology has given us the opportunity to put options out there for alumni that we've not had or thought about strategically in the past, and giving even that pioneer class the option to do something virtually and see them respond to it, I think is a great example of what we're talking about here in the session. Okay, our third question, practicality a little bit. So the current crisis is creating tremendous torque on a lot of the gears that are in our engagement engine. Things like volunteering, chapters, our membership programs, especially. So the question is there a way we can leverage this moment to maybe retool those things a little bit to make them even more attractive to the class of 2020, 2021, and recent alumni, especially? We've already heard a little bit about doing extra career job outreach, but Paul, I know you're an expert when it comes to all things membership, and that's such a big part of what so many of us do. Maybe you can walk us through that.
Well, if I'm an expert, it's only because I have a great team behind me at Penn State that kind of props me up to be. But it's become a little cliche right now, and I don't want anyone to think that my next comment is in any way flip. But the cliche is there is opportunity in crisis, right? I mean, how many times you can't turn the TV on without hearing the word unprecedented or look for opportunity, right? And yet, there is a tremendous amount of opportunity in here to do exactly what you're talking about, Jay, and that is reframe the value proposition of what it means to be involved with an alumni association. At Penn State, we are a membership program, and what this has given us the opportunity is to really talk about the value of being a being a member in the Alumni Association. How membership is a key that unlocks so many benefits that are going to help alumni through this time, whether it's our lifetime career services that we offer, whether it's kind of like I said, just pushing our career services programs out to the front, using the Alumni Association to navigate what can be complex institutions to help unlock, again, some benefits that we have. You know, when the crisis hit, we split our team up into three fast acting groups. We call them prides, obviously Nittany Lions, right? And our three prides looked at what our digital first mindset is going to be moving forward and what the digital experience will be. It's how do we honor the class of 2020, which is really the topic that we're talking about today. And then the third one is what we call lifting up lions. And that's really calling all the resources from across campus that can be put in a one-stop location for alumni that are having a tough time, right? You look and see 15, 17, 20% unemployment on the horizon. We ask the question, how can the Alumni Association be that hand on the shoulder to help our alumni through this time? And we've put those resources all in one spot. All of this will help us on the other side of this continue to tell the story of the value of being involved, whether it's as a volunteer, as a member, with your alma mater, and how we can potentially be one of the things to help people through this difficult time.
That's very well said, Paul. Paul for president, I think, is my reaction to that. You know, there's just so much about engagement that is critically important to multifacets of our lives as human beings in the world we find ourselves in today. And as Paul, I think, was sharing with you, this is our moment to shine. And we hope that these conversations are helping you feel that way as well. So another piece of this practicality is how do we deal with our volunteers? Maybe deal isn't the right word, but you all know what I mean. We need to find ways to keep engaging our volunteers who are used to doing things in person, perhaps, and also recruiting volunteers to do things for the campus that we'd not even thought about going into the future. Think about, you know, virtual admissions activities where alumni could get involved, et cetera. So Susan, I want to turn to you on this. How do we manage this practical piece of volunteering? And especially as we think about the class of 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, so you know, these are the questions that we all immediately struggled with or went to, right? And I just want to put a side note here. I think it's really important that as we plan for the class of 2020, 2021, 2022, and how we engage our alums moving forward and our volunteers, we need to remember one thing. We're not going back. The world that we knew of, we're all going to get into a plane and we're going to go have these big events, may or may not come true, but it's going to be a long time. What I've challenged my team, who is phenomenal at meeting these challenges, is, okay, we've had some great success in meeting people in their towns, in their homes, but how are we going to do this going forward? And if we say we're going back, we're dismissing all this great work that we're doing now. So let's not go back. Let's continue to go forward and let's build on some of these. Those are the things that we're looking at, and involving your key volunteer leaders is key. Ask them. I'm a big proponent of going back to the source and saying what's working for you, what isn't working for you. Not just the alums and the volunteers, but also the students. And also we have a ton of alums who have given to us, but they're not volunteering. So I've gone back to them. What is it that would make you, help you feel more engaged, be a volunteer? And we've reached out to them in a way that we're bringing them, if you will, inside the Beltway and helping them help us define what our next moves are. So it's a lot of hands-on work, and it's also giving them an opportunity to own what we're doing. I will say some of the suggestions I may not have jumped on right away and said, oh yeah, we're going to do that. But you know, it's also about understanding that it's not a one size fits all, as I said earlier. And so, yeah, go ahead, try some of these things. We've had volunteers want to have sessions where it's very specific. Almost, in my opinion, it was too specific of a seminar or a webinar, but it really hit home with a lot of students and a lot of young alums. It was about transitioning into the workforce and working remotely, and it really resonated and it was well received. And those two alums, I think, those two volunteer alums, their idea, they owned it, they launched it, we supported it, and it's gotten a lot of feedback from our alums and students that it was very, very helpful. And they've even suggested, silly as it sounds, working 101. What does it mean to transition? And I know a lot of the schools do this, but now working 101 in this new world as we move forward, what does that mean? What does that really, really mean? So some of the ideas.
Thank you, Susan. Again, very well said. And working 101 is the reality that many of us face now, especially those of us that are sitting on a couch or a kitchen table. Hopefully there's some of you enjoying this conversation from a beautiful spring day outside, wherever you are. So thank you to our panelists so far. We're now halfway through our session, which means it's time to get to your burning questions. And the first question that we've seen come through is for Jorge. So Jorge, I'm going to call on you on this one. It's a question about your comments with respect to career and helping young alumni especially find jobs. Are there particular career or mentorship platforms that you have used at the different places that you've worked? You could provide some of those as a resource to the folks listening in.
Absolutely, happy to, Jay. So we are currently on Brazen, which has been a good platform for us the last couple of years. That contract with Brazen is about to expire for us. We know that it has some limitations, and so we started looking at a couple of other platforms that are popular, that are out there. We are looking at People Grove. We also looked at Graduate. My alma mater, UCLA, uses Graduate, which is the UCLA one, is how it's branded. For us, looking at what we really are planning to use this platform for, we're looking at People Grove as a platform that we're realistically, going to be using to engage both students and alumni. But then and part of it too is in making this decision, it's also what other type of integrations do the platforms offer, right? So we know that some of them are now using Zoom as a part of their as a partnership. Others are connected already with Brazen. They have part of Handshake that's been integrated. How does it talk to your CRM so that you're able to get information back and forth between the two? How easy is it for somebody to fill out their profile? So those are all the types of questions that we are asking ourselves. And we're not just making a decision as an alumni engagement office. We've also have engaged the Career Center because we know that they are the ones that have access to the students, trying to get a sense of which platform might work best in terms of integration and making that transition from student to alumnus. So those are all the different factors that we are considering. Also our IT people on campus to make sure that they can support whatever decision we go with. And then also making sure that my team has a preview of it, because they're the ones that are going to be, connecting the individuals together. They're going to be the ones that are going to be feeding the platform. And of course, our communications team, right? Because they're going to be the ones that are going to be doing all the marketing to let people know that we have this program that is about to launch. So those are the things that we've been considering and looking at, and we're very close to making a decision.
Thank you, Jorge, for taking us through your thought process there and some check boxes. We've also had folks sharing some resources in the chat, which is great. Again, that chat will be available with the recording after our live session, as will our contact information, so you can get in touch with Jorge directly. This next question, Paul, I might turn it to you because it's about marketing in particular. There's been a few comments and questions that have come through about how much is too much. We have so much content that's being pushed out now through email, especially Zoom webinars, et cetera. How do we get the pulse of our alumni enough to know what the right balance might be?
Yeah, it's a good question, and honestly, it's something that we have struggled with at Penn State. I mean, we were really quick to pivot and offer a number of webinars, but we have said in a number of different conversations now, hey, are people zoomed out, right? Is there just so much saturation in the marketplace now for opportunities like this one, opportunities through our institutions, that people might be somewhat oversaturated? And so it's an ongoing conversation that we continue to have over frequency and how often we offer things like this. But look, it gets back to a question that we have talked about for years and years and years in this profession, and that's the relevancy of the programs that you're offering. If your programs are relevant, people are going to continue to come out and participate in them. And so to the extent that it can be tied to topics around current events, topics around how to help people advance in their careers, topics that are on top of mind for people today, the more relevant and the better attendance you're going to have in those things. So I wish I could say a magic number, like, 2 webinars a month is the right, and that's the secret sauce. There really is no number that's right. It really boils down to the quality and the topics that you're presenting.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for being vulnerable enough with us at the beginning to say, hey, we haven't figured this out yet. And that's what these conversations are really for in our alumni engagement community of practice here. And thank you for that. That's so important. This next question here, I think I might turn to you, Susan. It's about this concept of events, and have you all made decisions about large person events in the fall or even in the spring of 2021? And if you have or haven't, what are some of the barometers or metrics you're looking at as to when you might return to some large scale events?
So, yikes. I'll go down that road. We actually, the university just put out a very well thought out, methodical, practical approach to what our steps might be or hope to be based on the public health trends as we go further into the summer and of course into the fall. As far as events, as I said, I really think we're looking at a patchwork quilt as we move forward. I think we need to take the work that we're doing now and meld it into the work that we did. And I had a conversation with one of your former panelists earlier this morning, and we talked about creating the breadth of the foundation, and then the in-person will go into the depth. And I thought that was Chris Marshall, and I thought it was so incredibly well said, because it's exactly what we should be thinking about. When we get back to that one-on-one, then yes, then we can really have those face-to-face. If it's not a virtual, if it's actually in person. I mean, if they live in near your area, you could actually do it now as long as you're social distancing and with your masks on. Hopkins actually happens to have 39% of our entire constituency live in the Maryland area. So I could possibly be doing that now. The events that we have our Young Alumni Weekend coming up in the fall, and we have our annual Alumni Association meeting. And honestly, to be honest and transparent, I'm having them create 2 opportunities. One is virtual and one is in person. But I truly don't think that we're going to be bringing back 400, 500 people. For example, we had a leadership summit, and I think that we're moving toward 1 more year away before we have our leadership summit, but that's not my office, and I don't want to speak on their behalf because I'm not sure that that's confirmed yet. So could we have 25, 30 people in a room? Yeah. Can we have 300 in the fall? Not sure. So we're actually, I feel like now I'm a stewardess or an air flight attendant here, but I think that we're going to go down 2 paths at the same time. So whatever we create is transferable from one to another. It's just the way you have to be that fluid. You absolutely have to be that fluid right now.
Thank you, Susan. And we certainly are relying on John Hopkins a great deal for some of the information that is helping inform policy decisions here across the country. So it must feel tremendous to work at a place like Johns Hopkins right now. But I think we are going to find ourselves in this space of planning to plan quite a bit. And Paul, I invite you to jump in on that question as well.
Yeah, we're in the same boat that Susan's in right now. It's obviously some of those decisions are out of our hands. But one of the things that my team is looking at when we look at instilling a digital first mindset is there won't be another face-to-face event that we have at Penn State where we don't at least ask the question, how can we bring everybody else with us, right? Even if it's an event with 500 people, right? We serve thousands of alumni that may wish to at least hear the content and the information that's being presented, or at least feel the energy that's in the room, or for some of these events. And so we now have to think about, how do we make sure that everybody has the opportunity to not just attend, but experience if they can't attend? And that's a question that's going to be with us now moving forward. You're spot on, Susan. We're not going back, right? But what's going to be different, how we approach the future. And that's going to be one of those things that we're going to take with us.
That's very well said, Paul. I think, those two words, attendance and experience, don't mean the same thing. And so in this virtual world, we can focus so much more on the experience than perhaps we even could at our in-person activities. And thank you both. My next question here is for Jorge. And if you've been following the Q&A, there was a great question that Jorge answered a little bit earlier in the session, but I'd like to invite him to voice some of those comments now. The question is about, how do we think about inclusion in terms of the class of 20 and 2021, making certain that all of our alumni populations are represented in the things that we do, and that we are taking some special steps to lift up those who need it most. So Jorge, I'd love your comments on that question you answered earlier.
Right. So thank you, Jay. So for us, I mean, we're really trying to think about how we are engaging our youngest alumni. And to that point, we actually just made an offer, believe it or not, to a director of young alumni engagement that will be joining us on June 1st. He is relocating from Iowa during a pandemic. So that's going to be interesting for him to get to Southern California. But one of the things that we're looking at is really leveraging our alumni chapters and clubs and having them help us think about different type of programming that we might not otherwise, consider. So our ethnic, identity chapters and clubs have always been very active in the lives of our students. They come back, they mentor, they provide programming while the students are on campus. They've always had a presence at the commencement celebrations that take place. And they're continuing that relationship beyond the time that, graduation happens. Somebody raised, I think in the chat room, a question about these, welcome to the neighborhood type of event. We're still holding those over the summer, both regionally based, but also ethnic and gender based for the clubs and chapters that we help administer. And so the question really becomes we're no longer, while the welcome to the neighborhood has always been restricted on region based on the location of our alumni. Now they're taking a bit of a different approach because anybody can join virtually. Maybe you're not quite ready to make that relocation to that city, but you can join one of these conversations and get a sense of what that city has to offer. And so for us, as we think about how we offer these programs moving forward, you're absolutely right. Susan and Paul mentioned this already. There is no necessarily going back to how things were previously. Yes, we might have an opportunity for all of us to, or for that group to gather in person, but I do think that leveraging technology is going to be a bigger piece moving forward. So I mean, up until now, all of our key constituent groups, boards, the board of trustees, our board of directors, our athletic organization, when they bring their boosters together, it's always been mandatory that you participate in person. The 4 meetings that we have a year, the 3 meetings, has always been in person. For the first time, we're all having to conduct these meetings virtually, which raises the question, why haven't we offered this to our volunteers in the past, right? And moving forward, the expectation for our volunteers, our key volunteers, is that you were able to do it during a pandemic. What's changed now? Why can't we, if we choose to, engage with these groups, with these meetings in a virtual setting, right? So those are the things that I think when Susan says there's no going back, when Paul says there's no going back, those are the types of things that, you know, we need to be able to address. And that also extends to our workplace, right? So before, it's like we always had to be present for everything in the office in case that alumnus walked through the door. And granted, once we reopen our alumni centers, our alumni offices, there'll be some of that. But we just demonstrated that everybody can actually work remotely. And so, you know, those are some of the questions that we're going to have to deal with as we think about when we reopen the university, who really has to be there on campus.
Thank you, Jorge. I mean, there is no going back. This is not temporary. We are in transition. That's where we find ourselves now. And we've certainly gone through transitions before in engagement. And we will get through this one too. So thank you very much for your audience questions. We have so many more that we hope we can answer and follow up to the conversation, the live conversation today. One question that I'd like to put out there is for our panelists from our previous two webinars. And if you haven't seen them, both are available on demand. Alumni Relations in Uncertain Times, and the second one, Alumni Relations in Digital Spaces. I've invited back our panelists to answer this quick question, which is, what have we learned? What have you learned in the weeks since we last heard from you? And I invite you to give yourself a quick introduction, 1 minute or less, what's changed and what's next. So I'm going to turn first to Brandy from UCLA. Welcome, Brandy. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks so much for having me back. It's always a pleasure. I think I've learned a lot. I think that's the space that we're in right now. Everything is moving so quickly that one of the things that I think has shifted is we're all in a space where we have to be able to learn quickly, be nimble, adjust, and be prepared to pick up new skills. So the thing that's been really jumping forward for me during the past couple of weeks has been the importance of setting up workflows for repurposing content. And I think the issue there is we all really want to maximize our efficiency and our productivity, and understanding the workflow and the timeline and the desired timeline, I should say, which is because the goal is to meet it. Sometimes we can't. But I think that understanding those workflows very clearly up front allows us to be a lot more efficient on the back end. So as the Senior Director at the Alumni Association for Social Media and Membership, the other thing that's on my mind very quickly, and this was mentioned earlier, is the importance of rebranding our efforts around matriculating students to engaged alumni. I think it's a space that particularly now is so important, and really understanding how alumni associations have been there for students while they were students and will continue to be there for them as they become engaged alumni is particularly huge. So those would be the two things for me.
Thank you, Brandy. Very well said. And as a Bruin, I am experiencing that myself, all the wonderful content you're pushing out. Thank you. Mark, I'm going to turn next to you. And Mark is joining us early in the morning in Bali, I think.
It's just going on 2 a.m. here. Thank you very much for having me back, Jay. Thrilled to be here, and great panel today. The thing that's really been occupying my space is looking at the number of countries, provinces, states that are lifting restrictions or moving to a different set of restrictions. We're going to enter another plateau of temporary new normal. In fact, it's going to be a collection of temporary new normals. And a couple of things I'm certain of. One is that whatever the set of rules is we have to start out with will not be the set of rules that we have going forward, because we'll learn things and we're learning all the time. And so how can we be of value to our alumni who are going to have a collection of new normals? Susan mentioned her percentage of alumni living in Maryland, but how many of them will be in a different state with different regulations or international? So how can we be of that value? And then really leading to the space, which I think all of the panelists we're hitting on today, is how do we increase our value to our alumni, increase our value to the organization? There's a chance to inform the universities and other schools we serve of the value of alumni engagement beyond the traditional philanthropic kind of lens. The philanthropy is critical. From a number of universities I know it'll be essential going forward. There's so many other ways in which we can be valued partners to our alumni. And I think this is an opportunity for us to step into that space. And I would be spending time now investigating those new normals as we move forward and be present in the current time for them as we start to think about a new restaurant experience or a new career experience? What are those going to look like? How might we become a partner in some of those societal changes?
Thank you, Mark. A series of temporary new normals. Let's get ready for that. Nancy is joining us from Pitt. Nancy, what have you learned in the last few weeks since we heard from you?
Hi, all. One very specific thing I'll mention is that it's very hard to get the class of 2020 to ask for help. So we went into all of this assuming that they do need a lot of help. And at Pitt, we did some work to mobilize our alumni, specifically around support in informal mentorship, networking, job resources. And what we found is we've had an overwhelming amount of response from alumni, and we're still getting class of 2020 members like trickling in to raise their hands to participate. And so we know that they need the help. I think whether or not it's a messaging issue, we're not getting in front of them, or we're not front of mind for whatever reason for them to ask for help, or if they're just hesitant. They're trying to get things together on their own before they actually ask for help. So we're trying to attack this from both fronts.
Thank you, Nancy. Yes, it's true. Students and young alumni can often be shy and even unaware of the alumni population, the family that they're graduating into, who are really, really eager to help. And it's our job to sort of connect those two groups. Thank you very much. And Chris, how about some thoughts from you and your work with your clients?
Great. Thanks, Jay, and hello, everybody. It's great to see so many familiar faces, and I see a lot of names on the chat that folks recognize too. It's good to be here. I'm going to just reinforce a few points that have been made throughout the webinar, and even the last couple of folks have mentioned this. I think it's really important. You know, our in the United States, our federal government has a plan. Each of our states have a plan. The NFL announced their plan. Restaurants are rolling out their plans. It depends on where. I'm in Bethlehem. I'm not in Bali, Mark. I can't say that, but I'm in Bethlehem, PA, eastern part of the state. I'm different than where Paul is on the western part of the state. They're in a yellow stage right now, which means they're starting to soften up some social distancing. We're in the red stage still, so it's going to be different. All of us, what I'm saying is we all have plans, and we have to have stages of your plans. If you're an alumni professional on this call right now and you're an alumni leader, you need to have that plan. It should be something you're working on right now with your staff. It should align with your university's plan, of course, but also your state, wherever you are in the world. But be ready for different waves of social distancing being released and following what's happening around your own campus, but around your part of the world. I think it's going to be critical that you're in tune, highly in tune to what's happening there, and have your plan ready to go.
So get your plan ready, and if you want someone to review it, call Chris, everybody. So thank you, Chris, for coming back to join us in this last part of the call. Finally, I'd like to turn to Jen at Duke. Jen, what have you learned in the 2 weeks since we last heard from you?
So I was on this great call with a faculty member a little while ago, and he said, you know, is there a way alums can help me? And I said, what is it that we might be able to help you with? And he said, I have these surveys that I need to get filled out. I need to collect some more data for my research. I'd like to be able to share this beyond. And so I think, you know, we have the opportunity right now, particularly where people are looking for different ways to engage their populations, on reaching out to faculty and saying, hey, can we connect you to an alumni population to help you with your research? Is there an opportunity too for us to survey our alums? I think, Susan, you were saying earlier, one size does not fit all. And I think right now, while we're trying to figure out what our next steps are going to be, asking our alums what they actually want, what they need, and what they're interested in is such a wide range of things. And we have the opportunity sometimes to be more flexible than we have been in the past. And you can bring people together that you never would have been able to bring together before. So we did a faculty session, East Coast time, it was lunchtime here, and it was, you know, just after work in London, and we were able to connect two communities that normally would never have that opportunity. So I think a lot of times when we think about virtual connections, virtual engagement, digital engagement, we think about what we can push out there. But I think right now we also have the opportunity to really pull in a lot of information for our alums and figure out how we can best serve them, particularly at this moment.
wonderful chat that was happening during your response. So people clearly value your opinion. Thank you to all of our panelists today, both our featured panelists, Susan, Jorge, and Paul, and those who joined us from our previous sessions. There was this great question in there too about how to make our digital and virtual engagements more fun and inclusive for those who are viewing webinars or participating in meetings. And so here's a real life example. We're going to throw up a poll here in a moment where I invite you to share with us a little bit about how you're feeling right now in terms of your own connection to your alma mater, in terms of how you're thinking about your ability to innovate, and also what topics you might like to hear about in future sessions. So that poll is live now. I invite you to vote on that poll. Okay, so with that in mind, I want to tell you a little bit about our alumni engagement community of practice. This is a concept that was put together by a number of us Chief Alumni Officers from across the country to stand up, again, an informal and in-depth conversation to really create a virtual safe space for us to share information with one another. Our hope is for this to be grassroots. Our hope is to bring in thought leadership from people like you. And as was mentioned on the call already, we're not interested in the gurus. So with that, we'd really love your input on what topics to bring into future sessions. And that's the final question here on our poll. Great thing about this poll feature here, again, I can see exactly who's responded and who hasn't. So as we round out the conversation today, I invite you to please put in your response so I can share these results back with you. Okay, I'll say it before and I'll say it again. This is really when our industry shines. When we work together for one another, that's what engagement is all about. And it's been alluded to in our conversation already, which is this idea that this is the time for engagement to shine. So now that we've got some of our results in, I'm going to end the poll and share those results with you. Here we go. Let's see how we're doing. So overall, how connected do you feel to your alma mater? I think it's important for us to reflect on that at this time. What is our own undergraduate or graduate college or university doing to try and stay in touch with us? So we see that for the most part, we've got this sort of nice distribution. Most people feeling somewhat connected. That's great. How do you feel about your ability to innovate right now? Wow, this response, this is so exciting for me that all of you are feeling optimistic about our opportunity to innovate right now. That is just why we are doing these webinars in the first place. And then for future discussions, we got some topic interest here. Thank you. We will certainly focus on some of these top level items here. So with that in mind, I want to share with you also the contact information for our panelists here today. We invite you to be in touch with us. This contact information, along with our Q&A and chat text and the recording, will be shared out with you in just a few days after the live session. So we'll send this all out. Now, be well, stay healthy. Thank you again, and bye-bye.